all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once, and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Hello and welcome to History for Weirdos.
We're your hosts, Andrew
and Stephanie.
And each week, we're going to take you on a journey into the strange, obscure, and relentlessly entertaining corners of human history.
Now listen up, friends, because it's about to get weird. Hello, weirdos, and welcome to episode number 40 of the History for Weirdos podcast. And yes, I'm doing our little intro today because, yes, I did not follow through with writing my episode for the week, so my lovely, sweet husband, Andrew, had to pick up the slack, and he is doing an awesome episode for us again this week.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Don't worry. I'm used to picking up the slack.
Oh my God. Yeah, right. Where are my socks? You're wearing them.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
But no, seriously, Andrew, thank you so much. It's been just a very busy weekend.
Yeah. A busy few months for you.
Busy few months that should be ending in about 25 days and 20 hours or so.
But who's keeping track?
And once that's the case, I can't wait to give you less slack, I guess, to be picking up with the podcast. But tell us, me and the dear listeners, what are we discussing today?
Well, we have something kind of interesting today. So a few weeks back, I did an event, and it got me thinking about one of the weirder events that happened in ancient history. And this was an event or an instance of natural phenomena dictating the course of human history.
Oh, I love when that stuff happens.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Things outside of human control kind of like change everything.
Right?
Yeah, we're kind of living through that right now.
A little bit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, tell us more.
So we're going to go back all the way to the year, for our story, the year 585 BC. So it's a little bit back in time.
Yes.
But, before we even do that, though, I actually have to give a little bit of background.
Okay.
So we're going to go all the way back to the Bronze Age.
Okay.
And you know what we're going to talk about?
Is it the Bronze Age collapse?
We're going to talk about the Bronze Age collapse just for a split second. And honestly, we could have an entire, hour-long episode to the Bronze Age collapse. So I'm just going to sum it up in about a minute and a half instead.
Okay.
So the Bronze Age, if you listeners already didn't know, lasted, and the Bronze Age, by the way, when I refer to this, is the Bronze Age of Mesopotamia, the Near East, and even the Eastern Mediterranean, like Greece as well, so the Aegean. So lasted roughly, and very roughly, from around 3000 BC to around 1200 BC.
Wow.
And so the latter part of that, you had these massive, very wealthy, very powerful empires. They just all fell. Mm-hmm. If they didn't fall, they were only a shadow of their former glory. Like Egypt, for example. Mm-hmm. You had the last great native king of Egypt, Ramses III,
right?
Who fought off a group of marauders called the Sea Peoples.
Oh, yeah, the Sea Peoples.
The Sea Peoples, yeah. Very mysterious. I'm not even going to go into them because that's just a rabbit hole where we will not emerge. But just know that a lot of empires just completely fell.
A bunch of empires fell at once?
Or within a generation.
Okay, within a generation.
So you saw the Trojan War happen right around 1200 BC, right? Mm-hmm. So Mycenaean Greece was poised to essentially be have unprecedented power, but they felt they ironically destroyed a civilization, and then they were themselves destroyed about 30 years later.
Wow.
Roughly, right?
Okay.
We really don't know exact dates. But just know everything went to shit.
Everything went to shit during the Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so basically it kind of cleaned the slate, and so, for anyone to really take over. And so during the next few centuries, Assyria was one of those was kingdoms that kind of coalesced around their heartland.
Okay.
But they never fell. And so they eventually rose to power again under the Neo-Assyrian Empire.
Which means new.
Which means new.
Okay.
Right? As opposed to the Middle Assyrian Empire or the Old Assyrian Empire. So the Neo-Assyrian Empire just really runs things in Mesopotamia. And they were brutal. They were
running
like
shit.
They were running shit.
Brutal about
they were
it.
brutal. They created the largest empire the world had ever seen up until that point of time.
Okay.
Around think of the 800s, 700s, 600s BC. Mm-hmm. The end of the 600s BC, they were so successful at being so brutal that everyone hated them.
I bet.
Everyone hated them.
It's a good way to make enemies.
Right. Great way to make enemies, and they fell. So, unsurprisingly, right? Basically, an entire, the Medians, or the Medes as they're called, which is they're a group of people from present-day Iran.
Okay.
And the Babylonians.
Okay.
They kind of formed this coalition, took down the Assyrian Empire.
The Neo-Assyrian Empire, because
Yeah.
they were super mean.
They were super mean, and the Medes were nah, fam, we're not about this life. Babylonians, because they ruled over them both.
Yeah.
The Assyrians did, and so they're like, no more. We're done with this, and they, this once mighty empire basically fell.
That's what happens, right? When a big empire is oppressive and brutal to other groups, other nations, other cultures, whatever. Eventually, they get fed up, and they overturn them.
Exactly.
That
yeah.
happens over and over again.
And it happened here.
Okay.
The moment that they slip up, the moment that they show any vulnerability, they're done.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened.
So to summarize, just in a not so experty way, tell me if this is correct.
Sure.
You told us about the Bronze Age collapse.
Right.
Where a bunch of cool empires were all kaput around the same time. To fill that void over a few hundred years, the Neo-Assyrian Empire rose. They were not super chill, and then people rebelled against them, and then they were kaput.
That's, I think, a pretty good summary.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what's next?
And then, and this is kind of setting the stage for our story.
Mm-hmm.
So you have those two empires, right? The Medes, of the Median Empire, the Babylonians of the Babylonian Empire.
Yeah.
And then you have the Kingdom of Lydia.
Okay.
Which comprises, most of present day Turkey.
Okay.
Those are kind of your three major power players
And they're
in
all
the Near
close to
East.
each other.
Yeah, they're all close to each other. Just to kind of paint you a picture, right? So those are the guys, they're running things now.
Okay.
They're running things. Egypt.
These are our main characters.
These are our main characters, right?
What's Egypt doing?
Egypt they never really recovered from their Bronze Age collapse, so they exist. They're just not as powerful as they would have hoped to be. Mm-hmm. Ironically, just kind of funny aside, they were bitter enemies with the Neo-Assyrians, but at the very end, they were actually the best allies.
Oh. It's
Very
always funny when that happens.
Again, that's another rabbit hole, but yeah, pretty weird. So this kind of leads us to our story. So 590 BC.
Good year.
It's a good year, right?
Yeah.
The Medians and the Lydians, they have a border on this river called the Halys River, and they're not necessarily friends. They're not necessarily enemies. They're kind of just in this middle ground.
Okay.
It all starts in 590 BC, though. We have a war breaks out between them, and the way it happened is kind of absurd. And this is where we have ancient authors. You kind of question their reliability a lot of the time. Some are better than others. Even the best, though. Sometimes you're like, really? Is that it? Has that happened? Mm-hmm. So this comes from a Greek historian by the name of Herodotus. And he records that a group of Scythians, which are a nomadic group of people from the steppes, they were at the court of the king of Media at the time, King Cyaxares. Great name, by the way.
Yeah, wow.
Cyaxares. I think that we need to name one of our future animals Cyaxares.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
These Scythians, in one way or another, they're at the court of Cyaxares, and they were humiliated by him. I don't know why. I don't know how. But they're humiliated. In order to get back at Cyaxares, they killed a Median boy and fed him to Zyaxares.
Oh, God.
Yeah, unknowingly to Zyaxares, of course.
Right. He thinks he's eating pork.
Oh, yeah. And
he's eating a boy?
And he's eating a boy.
From his own country.
From his own country, yeah.
Did he know the boy or was it just a random boy?
We honestly, Herodotus doesn't go into it, so we don't know.
Okay.
And again, this is like one of those things like this could be one of those like tropes that's created well after the fact, because this happened in 590 BC. Herodotus was probably born around like 100 years after this, like born, right? So we just don't know it 100%. But anyways, these Scythians now, obviously not in the good graces of Zyaxares.
No, that was messed up.
The little messed up. They flee to the court of the king of Lydia, Alyattes.
Okay.
So you have Zyaxares, who's the king of Media, and the king of Lydia is King Alyattes.
Some good names.
Great names, I know. It's amazing. So upon finding out everything that happened, Zyaxares demands that Alyattes extradites these Scythians back to Media, but his demand was refused, and war breaks out between the two countries.
Wow. I wonder why he refused. I'd be like, wow, you guys, that was really gross. That was a really gross prank. You got to get out of here.
Yeah, it's like, you're going back.
He must have had animosity towards Zyaxares.
Exactly.
Enough to let this start a war.
Right. I know. And there's only speculation. We have no idea. But it is kind of interesting.
We talked about the Scythians in a previous episode, right? When we were discussing, was it the legend of the, the Amazonian women? Did we bring that up in an episode?
The Scythians?
Yeah.
Yes. How they could have been the models, I guess, of the Amazonians.
Because their women they raised men and women equally in terms of horseback riding and archery and fighting and things, right?
Yeah, they were quote unquote raised in the saddle.
Yes, raised in the saddle, and they were nomadic and always just
exactly
crushing it in the saddle.
Crushing in the saddle. That's true. Yeah, they didn't really have cities.
Yeah. Okay.
So this war over something absurd lasts for 5 years.
I mean, it is absurd. I don't blame Zyaxares, though.
No, I don't blame him either.
We don't know the details,
pissed.
But that's really not chill.
I'd say that's pretty unchill, yeah.
Oh my god.
So
it lasts for 5 years.
Lasts for 5 years, and we're gearing up to what would be a climactic battle. Mm-hmm. And it starts off indecisively. Okay. Which, based off how this war is going, that honestly doesn't surprise me too much.
Okay.
But something interesting happens. At some point during the battle, an eclipse forms.
Wow.
An eclipse, yeah. So day,
a solar eclipse?
A solar eclipse. Mm-hmm. Day becomes night. This freaks out everybody because they view this as a sign from the gods that they are not pleased.
Uh-huh. And so this battle is taking place between the Lydians and who else?
And the Medes.
And the
Medians.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're battling.
They're battling it out.
And in the midst of fighting is when the solar eclipse occurs?
And everyone stops fighting because it's like, oh, this is freaky. And not only that, almost immediately, not only the battle ends, the war ends. A peace treaty is signed.
Because they're the gods are so mad they took the sun away.
Yes, exactly. And so they're like, okay, we're done. And these two countries would never fight again. This is it.
Oh my god.
This is it. There's more on that in just a moment, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the peace treaty signed, and it ends the war. Alyattes' daughter, Arianes, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she marries Zyaxares' son, Astyages, and the Halys River is now the official boundary between the two nations.
That's a good political move to ensure no future war.
Exactly.
At least for the next generation.
And it's interesting because according to legend, Astyages is the grandson of a man one of the few, leaders in history who we give the cognomen the Great to.
Who?
Cyrus.
Cyrus the Great?
Cyrus the Great, yes.
Oh, cool.
And so this battle is interesting for a few reasons. One of them I just kind of alluded to. But one of them is the mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher Thales of Miletus actually predicted this to happen.
Predicted the solar eclipse?
Solar eclipse,
okay.
yeah. So, in fact, much later Roman statesman Cicero claimed that Thales was the first man to ever predict a solar eclipse.
What a good astronomer.
I know, and even to this day, some historians are a little skeptical on this, but generally speaking, it's kind of loosely agreed upon that he did indeed predict this to happen.
He was able to calculate
he was a brilliant mathematician.
And the sun and the moon.
Oh, yeah. I mean, someone else, I think it was Plato or Aristotle. I can't remember which one, but he said that Thales of Miletus was the first OG Greek philosopher.
Oh, okay.
He was the best of the best.
Oh,
He had very high reverence even centuries later.
Yeah, it sounds like
I mean,
it.
Cicero was 500 years later. So
yeah.
Obviously this guy was really, really well respected.
For a long time.
For a long time, yes.
And here we are talking about Thales of Miletus on our podcast.
Exactly. I can go into Miletus and its role as an Ionian Greek city but I think most listeners would probably go to sleep with that stuff.
I fell asleep just while you were finishing that sentence.
Fair enough. So number 2, another reason why this is even more interesting, this alliance formed a long-lasting impact on the course of human history. Very, very long story short. Remember how I mentioned Cyrus?
Yeah.
So he ends up overthrowing Cyrus. Ends up overthrowing Astyages and the entire Median Empire and forming the Persian Achaemenid Empire, which ironically would become the greatest empire the world had ever seen. And not only did he overthrow, Astyages, the successor to the Lydian kingdom, a guy by the name of Croesus. No, they have this long-standing agreement now by this time that, okay, I have to come to the aid of my, former enemy, now friend, the Medians, and they duke it out, and what's his face? Cyrus wins. So Cyrus wins and then conquers Lydia as well. So both of these kingdoms that fought each other and were poised to become the superpowers, basically, they both fall within a generation.
Okay. So that's also why they didn't fight again. Yeah.
I know. That's kind of why. That's why I alluded to. I was like, well, they didn't fight, and there's a good reason for that.
They're gone.
They're both gone. Yes. Cyrus the Great conquers them both.
Okay.
And so it's interesting because if there was not an alliance formed between the Medes and the Lydians, it's very possible that Lydia could have survived this Persian advance, right, in some way, shape, or form. But again, that's just kind of alternative history, and it's a great what if scenario.
Right.
What is certain though is that this eclipse essentially did impact human history.
Yeah.
And also, this is one of the earliest events in all of history where we know the precise date because of that eclipse.
You're right. We don't usually know the exact date for ancient history things.
Yeah, something that's over 2,500 years old, we're not going to know the exact dates, but this time we know it was May 28th, 585 BC.
That's crazy.
I know, isn't that nuts?
Wow.
And again,
I bet some people even know kind of the time of day that it would have happened and everything too.
Right, yeah. I think we know it was kind of later, the later afternoon.
Oh my God.
Is that insane?
Can you imagine the chaos of a battlefield, right? The mass sounds and emotions, and all of a sudden all of that just coming to stillness because the sun is gone.
Yeah, and people will be like, ugh.
And day becomes night.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
The gods are not pleased.
No.
Yeah. And that's it, guys. That's the story. It's a short one, but I did a TikTok on this, and I really felt that I needed to just dive a little bit deeper just because it was so weird and so interesting.
That is so interesting. I'm sorry if you said this before, but does the battle have a name?
The Battle of the Eclipse, or the Battle of the Halys River.
I like the Battle of the Eclipse.
I know, I do too.
That sounds like a George R.R. Martin thing.
That's the name that was given to it, I think, on Wikipedia or something like that.
That's really cool. It definitely sounds like that'd be the good title of a fantasy book even.
I know.
If you could write a story, someone do this, one of the weirdos, and give us credit. Write a fantasy world version of this whole eclipse and the battle and the kingdoms and everything. That would be cool.
That'd be really cool.
Write this down, guys. Write this down.
Write this down.
This is a
Write
moneymaker.
this down, Jeeves.
Yeah. That's incredible, babe. Thank you so much for teaching us about the Battle of the Eclipse. Aside from you, obviously, because I had heard of your TikTok. I don't have TikTok right now, everyone. That's why I say I've heard of your TikTok.
I've heard of your TikTok.
Not seen it because it's too addictive for me, so I had to delete it. But I hear you recording your TikToks and things like that. So aside from you, I had not heard of this battle, which sounds crazy because it seems like, like I said, like a thing out of like a movie or fiction, but it's real.
I know. Sometimes like reality is stranger than fiction. I think this is a good example of that.
That's so cool. And where did you learn about this?
This is, I actually learned from a few different sources, like some from other podcasts.
What podcast?
One of them is the History of Persia podcast.
Okay.
Great podcast, by the way. Highly recommend it. And then also Wikipedia. And then also first Herodotus. The Histories by Herodotus.
And Herodotus, you've told me before, is this the historian that would really confuse dates normally? Or like time?
No, so he confused, or he didn't confuse, he vastly overestimated numbers.
Okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So he would say like during the invasion of Greece by the Persians in like 480, he estimated there was like 2 million Persians that came by. And most historians are like, okay, like all historians are like, no, that's absurd.
There's no
way. But so they're like, what they do think though is that his Persian wasn't as good as he thought.
Oh,
and so
he was misunderstanding.
Yes, there's basically the word for like a unit of 1,000 men and a unit for 10,000 men is very similar. And then they think he got it confused, so they really think there was an army of 200,000, which is even
insane.
at the time, that's nuts. I mean, even today, that's insane.
Yeah.
But back then, that's just like utterly absurd. But like, I guess I shouldn't say absurd. It's just ridiculous. But it is still plausible because the Persians, at their very height, they would in like 500 BC, they controlled around 40%, or their subjects were like 40% of the entire world's population.
That's insane to think about.
Right.
Almost half the world
Was a Persian subject.
Wow.
Yeah.
But also, can you imagine Herodotus like going around getting information, talking to people, and being like, oh my, like him misunderstanding me, like 2 million? Oh my God.
I know.
I have to write this down.
Yeah, 2 million people at that time would have been 2% of the entire world's population.
Yeah. So it's funny that he didn't think he was misunderstanding.
I know. So yeah, because 0.2% of the entire world's population, still a very large percent,
very
right?
large.
But, more plausible.
Yeah. Well, thank you, babe.
You're very welcome.
You're always so full of knowledge.
Thank you.
It's one of the many things I love about you.
Aw.
Well, thank you, weirdos, for listening to today's episode about the Battle of the Eclipse.
Yeah, or Hollis River. And I know it was a short one, guys, but hopefully you still learned a lot.
Yeah, I learned a ton. So thank you all. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this is episode 40.
Episode 40.
And so in 10 episodes, that's how numbers work, we will be on episode 50, and we want to do a very special episode for episode 50, and we would love to do, like, in addition to like a fun story or something, do an AMA, like an Ask Us Anything. AMA is Ask Me Anything, but it's both of us. So please, you can email us at historyforweirdos@gmail.com. Any questions you have for us about the podcast, about us, our interests outside of history, or weird history questions that you think are funny, anything. We would love to hear from you all. So again, you can email us at historyforweirdos@gmail.com.
Yes, or even find us on Instagram at History for Weirdos as well. Mm-hmm. And also, if you want to interact on my TikTok, you can find me at roma.omnia.
Yeah, I highly recommend them.
Thank you, yes.
Again, I only hear them from the other room, but they sound very entertaining.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And thank you, weirdos. Have a wonderfully weird week in honor of us. And until next time.
Until next time, weirdos. Adios.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Don't forget that your skin is your largest organ, and the sun can be your skin's worst enemy. Dermatologist-recommended Neutrogena products offer the ultimate protection for your skin. From makeup remover wipes to Hydro Boost Water Gel Facial Moisturizer, BJ's has your entire lineup of Neutrogena skincare products. And now through December 3rd, save $4 on any Neutrogena product at BJ's. Love your skin back and save now through December 3rd, only at BJ's.